Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacey and Phil Thompson.
It's nice to be with you today for another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. My name is Phil Thompson.
And I'm Steve Lacey.
How are you today, Steve?
Doing okay.
Good. This is always the most awkward part of our podcast.
What are we talking about today?
Okay, that's a good transition. So we are talking about, ironically enough, podcast. We're going to talk about how you can actually make a podcast. We got about 7 steps here on how you can produce your very own podcast.
Yeah. So why would one want to make their own podcast? I guess we'll cover this very quickly, right?
Well, we will. And as most of our listeners know, unless you're new to us, we're a company that works with churches and ministries. We provide technology and really assist churches in not just tech things, but other areas. And so podcasts are a great way to communicate your message. So you can do podcasts on different scales and all sorts of different ways. For many of the people we have, customers we have, they might take their message, their Sunday morning message perhaps, edit it down and create a podcast. Or for those who really get creative, they could actually sit down and maybe do something every week that would be either related to what their message has been or something else.
Yeah, that may be a really good. They'll have a topic series, and this will be kind of the pastor's notes or the extra credit on whatever the talk was that week. Yeah. So
podcasts are a great way to connect with people because they can subscribe, as you do. You subscribe. How many podcasts do you subscribe to?
I don't know, quite a few.
Yeah, so I don't know how you have time to listen to them. But and how do you subscribe?
You would be amazed.
I mean, we're getting ahead of our deal here.
We are,
but I mean, you just go and you find a podcast.
You find a podcast and you subscribe, and you're on there. You'll get their new editions as they come out.
So it automatically comes.
And so it's just a great way. And I listen to podcasts while I'm getting ready in the morning, while I'm exercising, while I'm commuting or driving in the car. You'll be amazed how many hours a day you can get some good listening done. So
it's a great tool to communicate whatever message you want to use. I mean, it could be, this is a podcast we do called Church Solutions Podcast. And as you know, we talk a lot about technical things, although we talk about leadership stuff for churches. So it's really a great platform, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we've done some homework. We could tell you podcasting is really taken off. Yeah. In the past, 5 years, and it's just going more and more.
Yeah.
So
there's all sorts of ways and things you could do with this tool, and that's up to you, the listener, on how you want to utilize it. Because, like I said, you could just take parts of your messages, edit those down, and create podcasts. People that subscribe to them would automatically get them and listen to them at their leisure. Or you could do specially prepared podcasts, for different topics. So it's really as we just said, it's just a great asset, and it doesn't cost really hardly any money.
Yes. So let's get into what are the 7 steps for making a podcast? Let's say I want to do it.
All right. So 7 steps. So the first thing I would start with is equipment. You need to obviously have some equipment to be able to record a podcast. Now, my background is radio. I have a degree in broadcasting, and I spent almost 20 years in broadcasting, and in some ways it's a little bit similar in the sense of you're recording. You may not be broadcasting on a big 400-foot tower, but you actually have a better reach because you're going to the internet, which is just tremendously, there's no limitation. So you need equipment, and there's a couple things that you should probably look at as far as equipment. You probably need some software, and I would recommend some hardware, although you could do everything with software. But I recommend some hardware. So maybe I'm a dinosaur, but I do.
Right. Okay, so software. So let's start with that. So you basically need audio manipulation software, some software where you can trim and mix.
Those big words again.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to think how to categorize this.
It's editing. It's just
Yeah,
editing.
it's
software.
editing audio.
Yeah. So there's several things out there. There's like Pro Tools, and there's some free stuff like your favorite, Audacity.
Yes.
Right? It's
Very
software.
popular.
And you download it and you record, and you have multiple channels that you can record. You can do editing with it. It's open source editing. It's a great program. I use what I use and what we use for this one is called NCH WavePad, and there's a cost to that. One-time cost for the license, and you make fun of me for using it, but I like it because I'm used to it. I've used it for years, and they have some other packages too that go along with that. But what you're doing is you're recording, and you're creating an MP3 file. You could create a WAV file or other file types, but MP3 is really what you want to do. And so you're using this software to create this. Used to be back in the old days, we had tape, magnetic tape, and we would thread the recorders, and then if we wanted to edit, we had to take a razor blade and cut out. I mean, literally, that's what we did. We would splice tape together back in the old days, but this is all digital now.
Right. So with this software, you can record directly to the software, or you can take pre-recorded stuff and edit it.
Yes.
As well.
Yes to both those questions.
Yes. Okay.
So so there's stuff out there. Audacity is free, but there's other stuff too that you can look around and see. So the software part would go on your computer, and then if you have, so let's say maybe you're interviewing somebody like you and I were talking, or sometimes we interview somebody. So you're going to have at least maybe 3 microphones, and you can use software to do this. What I would call mixing. You could send 3 feeds or 4 feeds into different software that we just talked about.
Right.
Or you could get something like a little mixer that would cost you probably around $100. And we have a little 4-channel Mackie mixer here. Easy for you to say. And we literally just mix everything with this little mixer hardware.
So this is a 4-channel, so we'll have 2 of our microphones, which we'll get into microphones in a minute, that are plugged into this mixer thing. And then what we do prior to each show is Phil puts on his DJ hat and says, let's check level, or his engineering audio hat and says, let's check levels.
Yeah, yours is a little hot right now. Let me back it down. But yeah, so you just take this mixer and you plug microphones into it, and then it goes from the mixer, you plug it into your computer, and we just go right into the record. Little deal on our computer,
and you can see VU meter outputs as we talk, and you can go to the mixer and say, oh, Steve's a little too hot, turn the knob down for Steve.
And so it's again, you could probably do all this with software, but I have a combination of hardware and software. And then the other thing too is like, for instance, when we interview people, we generally use Skype. And so what I do is I happen to have another laptop, so I just put another laptop by the mixer here. So I have 2 laptops in front of us. And if I'm interviewing somebody, I call them on Skype, because Skype usually, if you do Skype to Skype, it's usually a cleaner, sound.
And it's popular. Most the podcast people that interview guests are interviewing via Skype.
What I do, and again, this might be kind of a dinosaur, but I just take the feed from my computer that has Skype in it, and I send it to the mixer. So it's kind of like, instead of having a third microphone, we just plug in from Skype. So now we have 3 sources, 2 microphones and Skype, and then we just kind of mix that down and send it to the other computer that has the software that has the actual recording software.
So you're adjusting levels on your mixer.
Yeah, so that's what I do. To me, it's just a little easier to do that, but it gives you the ability to talk to other people from around the world. You don't have to have them sit here. I mean, when I used to do radio interviews, we used to have people come in the studio, and if we did national interviews, we'd get them on the phone, which you can obviously still do, but anyhow. So that's the deal. So software, you can get it for free. If you want to use a mixer, probably around $100, maybe a little cheaper, depending on what you have.
Right. And I guess if you're just doing your own podcast without, if you're taking the week's message and turning those into podcasts, you wouldn't need microphones, right? You'd have your you'd have your audio setting.
If you've saved it already, if somebody recorded your message, they recorded it on MP3, and then you just drop it in Audacity and edit it.
Or if I just have one microphone, I probably wouldn't need a mixer either, right?
No,
I can
no,
just
you wouldn't.
levels.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's real simple to do. All right. So moving on. Speaking of microphones, what should we use for a microphone? Well, again, if you're using a little mixer like we just talked about, well, there's lots of different microphones out there, and you and I were just talking about this before the actual podcast. For some podcast people, this is the best microphone ever, and you need to get the Audio Technica, whatever it might be, AT2020, which I actually have. I don't use it. Microphones are important in the sense that you want to get something that sounds decent, but what's even more important, in Phil Thompson's opinion, is the microphone placement and watching your levels and as you record. And if you do that right, you can, and if you have the right, like if your mixer has some gains like low or mid-range or whatever, you can kind of tweak some of that stuff and it can sound pretty good. Plus, you can get like what's called a wind guard. I think they call it a wind guard. We used to use it in broadcasting, a spit screen or whatever.
Thought it was a pop.
Maybe it's
screen.
A pop thing. I don't know.
Pop screen. You're the professional, right?
I just do it. I don't sit there and like, oh, this is cold.
Even my son that records his music has it comes as a pop screen, right? To make sure
musicians definitely have it. They really, they're using much higher quality stuff, or should be. But I've got one. I've got one in my office right now because I used to do some voiceover work. But if we really wanted to be fancy smancy here, we could give you a screen that would spit screen pop. I think in radio we called it a spit screen, but pop guard might be the official term. So you could put it in front of the microphone, and it's like a little screen that literally just kind of
keeps you from your P's from popping too hard,
pop too much on the deal. So sometimes we used to use these wind screens we would put on the mics as well. Little cover on the microphone,
especially if you go outside.
Yeah, outside. So. Again, if you want to get fancy smancy, you can do that. But I'm telling you right now, if you get a decent mic, you don't have to pay a lot of money for it, but if you get a decent mic and the mic placement is good, which we're not always good at. Sometimes the mic placement isn't good when we do our podcast, and sometimes the levels, I think my level's probably a little lower than yours right now. Oh. But if you really pay attention to those little details, you can put together a pretty decent sounding podcast.
And I don't have the most discerning ear, but I listen to a bunch of different podcasts, and I know the production quality of some of them is extremely high. Mm-hmm. But I can't tell the difference between the quality of ours and some of these others. Actually, there's some that have a reputation for their audio being very low.
Yeah.
One that I listen to regularly, I always got to turn them up. And then some others are kind of towards the high end. So you want to make sure your levels are good. Yep. You don't want to be too low. You don't want to be too high, although I tend to lean towards the higher side because being too low is a pain.
Well, you always give me grief when ours aren't up to your standards. So I always have to be careful when I'm mixing it down.
And as I mentioned, I listen to podcasts all day, so I get a different variety, and I want to avoid the cellar on some of these.
I understand. Ones. Yeah. Well, one thing that's probably not on the list here, and I don't think I put it on here, but once you actually record it, maybe I do have I guess I do have it on here, post-production. We'll get to that in a moment.
All right. Okay, so microphones are it's kind of like we say with cameras, is if you got good lighting and you can get close, you don't need to spend a bundle.
That's what I'm trying to say, is you don't have to do that. So, but it's up to you. You could start doing your podcast and you start getting a bunch of followers and you want to spend a little more money, then by all means, go out there and buy that $300 microphone. Go for it, But I'm not sure you have to do that. So, all right. So moving on here quickly. Third point, the third piece or the third step, which I guess is equipment, is headphones.
Yes. So how do we use headphones?
So you and I don't use headphones unless we are interviewing somebody. And that's probably the case for everybody out there. When we're talking to somebody on the phone or through Skype is what I'm getting at when I say interview. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you've got to hear them, and you want to have headphones on because you don't want, if it's Skype or phone, you don't want to use
you don't want your mic picking up what's coming out of a speaker.
Yeah, if it's a speaker or something like that, speakerphone or whatever. So that's a good time to use headphones. That way you don't get any feedback. And honestly, again, you just get some earbuds.
Mhm.
You don't need anything at all, in my opinion. We used to have really pretty expensive headphones in broadcasting. And when I used to teach broadcasting school, I did teach that you can listen to yourself on your headphones when you're speaking. That's good, but don't put a lot of stock in that, but really in doing a podcast, you don't need.
Yeah. And you used to teach journalism, or what was it called?
It was broadcasting.
Broadcasting
had,
school.
Yeah, we had broadcasting. I did it for a
Right.
few years.
So you may need some headphones as you're doing your mixing, though. But during the
but let me just say this with mixing too. I don't think you really need them with mixing so much, because you want to mix when we're talking mixing here, and we'll get to this in a moment. We're talking about adding some opening music, and then having the body of your podcast, and then having
managing
music
some transitions
and the transitions between the music and the talk. And again, it sounds complicated for those who have never done it, but it's not too bad. I would rather mix listening without headphones, because most of the people, well, I guess maybe this is wrong, maybe not, but you probably listen to your podcast with headphones, don't you?
Or earbuds or headphones.
Earbuds.
Yeah, always. Because you're out exercising or working around the house.
That's probably a good point. I usually don't mix with headphones. I mix with just listening to the speakers is how I mix.
Yeah.
And I get that probably from mixing music at church.
Yeah.
So, because I see a lot of people mixing music at church with headphones, and it's okay if you're trying to identify the instruments and the voices and trying to dial those in, but ultimately you want to take the headphones off and hear what everybody else is hearing in the auditorium.
Right, because you're going to get different reflexes off the bass, off the walls, and things like that.
But that's another subject.
So, okay. Anyway, so headphones, you need some headphones if you're going to interview somebody.
Yeah, on your Skype or whatever it is.
Right.
But, if they're sitting next to you, obviously you don't need that.
All right, so I've planned out my podcast, and I created one thing we're not talking about here is what's the optimal length for a podcast?
Well, who knows? I like to do ours 30 minutes and under.
Yeah, we shoot for 25 minutes, right?
Yeah, we shoot for about 25, 26, and then we add, after this is all done, I will add intro, and I will add an outro.
Yeah.
Intro is, I have a friend of mine that is in radio. He did kind of the voiceover for, you're listening to the Church Solutions podcast, although he doesn't sound like that. But and then there's just, I think for us, we just run some music at the end. We don't do any voiceover at the end, and we probably should. That's probably a good point. You probably ought to have some kind of an intro.
We'll get into that in the post-production,
okay,
right?
Yeah,
I was just shooting it. How long should we do? And just based on, I've been doing podcasts since they existed. I could probably safely say, because I used to do books on tape.
Right.
And I was a part of the Books on Tape Club. As soon as podcasting came around, I'm like, I'm on to this. So just based on the things that I listen to, you don't want to drone on for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I would say anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes on the short side and an hour on the long side.
Yeah.
But I think the sweet spot is kind of where we're at with 25 minutes or so.
Yeah,
So anyway,
I think so.
We didn't. So I've recorded my 25 minutes, and I've got someone that's done an intro or some music for me and an outro, and now everything's recorded, and I need to head into what we're calling post-production.
Yeah, and let's talk very quickly about that intro and outro. There is music that there's free music out there that's available on the internet you can use. So you really shouldn't be grabbing somebody's music and using it without their permission.
That is true, but I have actually had one of my podcasters talk about there are legal limits to, you can play snippets.
Okay.
Legally, I can't.
But how long is a snippet?
I think it's less than 25 seconds. I could be wrong, but anyway.
Okay.
But anyway, and still, you don't want to plagiarize or use somebody's things without permission. Where you were going is proper, but
and there is music out there. You can Google it, and there's stuff you can use for free, or you can buy it for a very minimal amount of money.
Right.
Not a lot of money. I mean, and we changed our intro and outro a little while back, and We paid a lot of money for it, though, didn't we?
We paid tons
We
because
paid
we
your
had
son.
a talented musician.
Yeah, so we paid him a lot of money for
Yes,
his.
and if anybody's interested
There you go.
in their intro outro music, let me know, and I'll hook you up with somebody that can write
Yeah.
their own
Yeah, and he
and
won't
perform
charge you
your
too
own.
much. Only what, $500 or $600, right?
No.
No, I'm just kidding. That's not the case. But yeah, that's true. I mean, Chad put together that intro and outro music. So anyhow, all right. So
Yeah.
post production, where are we going over this? Very quickly. So I use a Mixpad software, which again is NCH, which is the company, and I believe you could probably use Audacity for this as well. Pretty sure
Yes.
you could, which
Yes.
is open source free, but it's a matter of tracks. Now in broadcasting, if you haven't been in radio or you don't understand tracks, you've got these tracks going all at the same time. And so I can have a track of music playing and then another track with the vocals, people talking, and I could even do other stuff depending on how complicated my mixer is. But I use 3 tracks. I have an intro, which is the announcer that we already put together with Chad's music. So that's already been mixed down so that they come on. This is what people hear at the beginning of the podcast. And then I bring in our actual podcast, you and I talking. As the music's fading, we come in on the other track. This is all running at the same time.
Right.
And then at the very end, when it's time to go bye-bye, I just run I think the acoustic version of what Chad did, with no vocals or nobody saying thanks for listening. We don't do anything. You could do that, but we don't do that. And so it's just music going. And so we just mix it all down, and then those 3 tracks get recorded as one, and a file is created, which is the MP3 file.
Yes. All right. So I've mixed, and now I have my MP3 file.
Yeah.
So
what's
next?
All right. So as far as post production, that's it, right?
Yeah, that's it for post production.
Okay.
No, we're moving on to
uploading.
I got my MP3 file now. I need to make it available to people, right?
So you've got to have, obviously, if you put together a podcast, it's not going to really do any good if you don't share it with people, right?
Yes.
So how do you do that? So this is kind of your area, right, Steve? You're hosting.
Yes.
You've got to upload it. Actually, you need to add some Id3 tags to it before you do that. But let's talk about hosting.
Yes. Okay. So if you're one of our customers, we have some tools already put together. You just upload to your Media Vault, and everything's taken care of for you. But if you're not, you want to go a different route, there are various hosts available to choose from that just specialize in podcast hosting. So there's a handful. I guess we can quickly talk about some of them.
Maybe just name a few of them. We don't have to get in details.
Right. So SoundCloud is one that's out there, is fairly popular. The one that a lot of the podcast people that I listen to use is called Libsyn, Libsyn.
Okay.
So
it's libsyn.com.
.com, yes. Blueberry, BLUBRRY.com.
Yeah.
There's another one. There's Podbean.
Okay.
Amazon S3, which is actually what we're using on the back end for our system.
Okay.
Podmatic, Buzzsprout, Spreaker, or some others that you can. So if you Google podcast hosting, then there's going to be some options there. Some are going to be free or near free, and some of these others are going to cost you a little bit. So I wasn't going to get into all the pros and cons of each of these, but we have a bunch of data on that. But you can kind of
you can look it up. But we do host, so if you want to use us, you can use us. But so one of the things that everybody's going to ask is, okay, so it's up there. How are people going to know about it? Well, you could give people the RSS feed,
right?
But a lot of people say, well, how can I get on iTunes? Because iTunes kind of is the big name, right? Out there. So with iTunes, that's a few hoops you got to jump through. And one of the things that you need to have are what is called Id3 tags. So this is where it gets a little complicated. And by the way, if you need help with this, just send us an email, support@StreamingChurch.tv. But Id3 tags, that's the information that is stored inside the media file. And so, for example, when you play an MP3 on your iPod, or do iPods still exist? Do they still make them? But, a picture is going to show up, and on that screen is going to be the image of the Id3 tag. And so if you don't do this, your podcast will look very it's still
Right.
cheap, like an amateur.
Right.
Okay. And so you want to use an MP3 tag software to put this together. And so I think Mac has an Id3 editor that already comes with it. We use what's called Stamp Id3 tag editor. And what it is you put together the information. So, okay, Church Solutions podcast. Today we're talking about how to do a podcast in 7
Right.
easy steps. Put the title in there. There's a little bit of body. Steve and Phil talk about podcast. And then there's another place where you have an image that's like 1400 by 1400 pixels or something crazy
Right.
like that. This is for iTunes.
Yeah. And some of these hosts we talk about will have this stuff built in too.
That's true. Yeah.
So
there are some things that this is probably the most complicated part of the whole thing, but it's not that bad once you start doing it.
right.
And so the Id3 tag is important, and then you put that together, and that basically gets stamped on your file that you've already made.
Right. And so iTunes knows what picture to put up when your podcast comes
Right.
up, and
Yeah.
titles and descriptions and all that info is embedded in your file.
Exactly. And so you really should have something like that. And then it gets on iTunes. It's a lot easier for people to find it. And, they can find it other places as well. So, again, this part, I'm a little muddy here, a little fuzzy on this because there are some details here. But if you need help on that, just send us an email. We'll help you. So anyhow, that's pretty much it. So the RSS feed we already covered.
Right.
And
So, and your host will take care of your RSS feed as well. We have an RSS feed if you're using our system. Some of these things, we're not dedicated to podcasting, but we support the podcasting. So
right. Yeah.
You may need to get your Id3 tags figured out if you're wanting to upload in your Media Vault here.
Right.
Make sure you do that before you upload. But some of these other hosts, I think, are going to hold your hand along the way because that's all they do is podcasting.
Yeah. We do streaming video primarily with StreamingChurch.tv, and we have church apps and church.
So it's as simple as that, huh?
Well, you know what? It's a little complicated in some parts, but really once you get rolling, once you start doing this a little bit, it's a piece of cake. You just get used to it.
Just like anything.
It's not really hard to do at all.
Once
I mean, it takes a little bit of time to mix. Post-production takes a little bit of time, and then uploading it, but it's not bad. So again, it's a great tool to use. I would strongly encourage you if you have a message out there, whatever the message might be, it's a great platform. Podcast will do that. So questions, send us an email. What's the email?
support@StreamingChurch.tv.
All right. So we promised we'd get out of here within a half hour, and I think we're going to do it. So we appreciate you spending some time with us. Let us know your thoughts. If you have something else to add to this podcast thing, maybe we've missed a couple things, by all means, let us know. And if we can help you in any way, Steve and I will be happy to do that. So, all right, time is up. We are out of here. Thanks again, folks, for listening to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. We hope you have a great day, and we will catch you next time.